distribution of 10 to 40 million of these braces, and the implementation of your rule. Did Congress pass a law?
New law regarding pistol braces. It's actually a ruling because the ATF does not have the authority.
Regular semi-auto is like, then we're going to go to semi-auto with the bump stock.
They're going to get these. They're going to be a regulation, and it ain't going to change a damn thing. It's not going to stop.
Breaking news, ATF has provided justifications for the Supreme Court to uphold their bump stock ban. Legal ruling challenges ATF's bump stock ban. As many of you are aware, there was a major SEC moment when the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in the Cargill v. Garland case that the ATF's final rule on bump stocks isn't actually invalid.
The submitted firearm brace, when attached to a firearm, does not convert that weapon to be fired from the shoulder and would not alter the classification.
Not going to bore you with the overall installation of the bump fire stock onto your AR system.
Distribution of 10 to 40 million of these braces, and the implementation of your rule. Did Congress pass a law?
Butt stock and the hand, you notice the handle right here. Everything along with the butt stock and the handle are actually connected to one another.
This decision dealt a serious blow to the ATF's current overreach and ultimately their claimed authority in this import. The ATF made the case for why the Supreme Court must review the Cargill lawsuit and ultimately protect their rule on bump stocks. The Fifth Circuit vacated the lower court's decision and remanded it back to the district court to enter a judgment in favor of the plaintiffs after finding that the definition of a mash gun as described in the NFA and GCA does not apply to bump stocks. This decision had major implications for not just bump stocks, but also for other ATF overreach, like the rule on frames and receivers, their pistol brace banned, and also the new rule. One of the key issues in this challenge was whether Chevron deference should be accorded to the ATF in relation to their final rule on bump stocks, or whether a different rule called the Rule of Lindy should be used in its place. If you're not familiar with what Chevron deference refers to, Chevron deference is a term coined after the Las Vegas oil spill. Contrary to Chevron deference, a different rule known as the Rule of Lindy states that when dealing with criminal statutory interpretation, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law in a way that is more favorable to the people who may be subject to the criminal convictions rather than the enforcement agency. The Fifth Circuit's AMANG panel ruled 13-3 that the ATF exceeded its authority by classifying bump stocks as mash guns under the GCE. The Fifth Circuit stated in their opinion that the ATF's rule violated the principles of tenderness of the law towards the rights of individuals. There, they are alluding to the Rule of Lindy in regards to this tendency.
What changes that item that was submitted was not produced and was not the item that was marketed.
What's happening is this little indentation that you see right here, just to the left of the pistol grip,
to be able to assist those that might not have full use of all of their limbs or whatever else.
What it's going to do is it's going to allow you to engage the trigger and still stay in contact with the bump fire stock itself.
So you say that the brace changed, and so you had to implement this rule.
A clear reading of the statutory language combined with a close consideration of a semi-auto firearms mechanics reveals that a bump stock is excluded from the technical definition of mash gun set forth in the GCA and NFA. Even though the very same agency regularly interpreted the prohibition on mash guns as not applying to the particular type of bump stock in question, we conclude that it does not. However, even if we are incorrect, the statute is at least ambiguous in this regard, and if the statute is ambiguous, Congress must resolve that ambiguity rather than the federal courts in that decision. If Congress or the ATF wants that definition of mash gun to include items like bump stocks, then the burden is on Congress to change the language in the statute. The ATF does not have the authority to do that on their own. Now that the Fifth Circuit has issued its decision overturning the bump stock ban, the ATF has decided to reverse its previous position. ATF requests Supreme Court review for bump stock regulation. Following the decision handed down by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, the ATF has sent a petition to the Supreme Court requesting that it examine the decision, which they contend is inconsistent with decisions handed down by a number of other circuit courts. Challenges to the identical interpretive rule that is at the center of this case have already been rejected by these other circuits. In addition, the ATF stresses the fact that events have taken place since they submitted their petitions, further complicating the panorama of the legal environment. According to the ATF, the disagreement over the regulation of bump stocks has become more contentious as a direct result of a recent decision handed down by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. This decision is commonly referred to as the Hardin decision. This verdict demonstrates how critically important it is for the Supreme Court to reconsider the case. It is inexcusable to have a situation in which the purchase or ownership of bump stocks is illegal in some circuit courts, but legal in others.
Brace that this letter was responsive to. Are you telling me that this brace is exempt from your rule?
In terms of these type of rifles, because you're doing a push-pull type of action here to try to keep this thing steady.
That are not
Is this
designed
brace
and
exempt from your rule?
I can't sit here and classify.
This
but
is
if
the
it's
brace who
submitted,
wrote
we
the
will give
letter.
it-
From you shooting it rapidly like that with the bump fire system in place.
If it's not ruled to be attached as a short-barreled rifle, it will not be subject to the rule.
This contradiction cannot be tolerated. This divergence not only undermines the uniformity of federal law, but it also lessens the practical impact of decisions made by other courts that have rejected arguments that are comparable. Specifically, this disparity undermines the uniformity of federal law. The implications of the ruling made by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals are emphasized by the ATF. They contend that the majority of bump stocks that are manufactured and sold in the Sixth Circuit will eventually make their way to other regions of the country. Because of this interconnection, there is an even greater demand for a legal framework that is consistent throughout. The ATF believes that the question that has been raised in this scenario is one of extraordinary significance. They argue that bump stocks, which are similar to other types of mash guns, pose grave threats to the general population, as well as to law enforcement, despite the fact that there is a lack of meaningful evidence to back this assertion. The perceived threat increases the level of urgency associated with finding a solution to the regulatory anomalies. In this particular instance, both of the parties concerned have asked the Supreme Court to reconsider the matter. They are requesting that the Supreme Court hear the case and grant certiorari in order to do so. The argument is that different circuit courts have come to contradictory conclusions on this vital issue, making it necessary for the Supreme Court of the U.S. to conduct an in-depth investigation into the topic.
Folks, plain and simple, a bump fire stock is a really stupid option.
Would you please quit telling this committee that the brace has changed and that's why you did the...
Unless you're planning on not hitting what you're shooting at and you just want to waste a ton of ammo, these things are not what you're looking for.
You're not exempting the same brace that you gave this letter to.
If the brace is submitted, we'll classify it.
Significance of the Hardin decision. The Hardin case, which came from the Sixth Circuit, is one of the more recent decisions that both parties are citing as support for their positions. This verdict is being hailed as a huge victory, and it has been brought up in a variety of different conversations. It is interesting to note that the Fifth Circuit's decision in the Cargill case led to a different result than the Sixth Circuit's decision in the Cargill case did on the validity of the ATF's rule. In the matter of Cargill, the en banc panel of the Fifth Circuit concluded that the text of both the National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act was unambiguous. They maintain that the plain text categorically excludes bump stocks from the definition of machine weapons. Later on, in the same opinion, they argued that even though the phrase may be interpreted in multiple ways, the Chevron deference standard should not be employed. Rather, the rule of Lindy should be utilized. In contrast to this, the Sixth Circuit began its analysis of the Hardin case with the assumption that the term used in the statute is, in point of fact, ambiguous. As a result, they proceeded on to the next step, which was to identify which doctrine need to be utilized to clear up this uncertainty.
To make this legal is to remove the 10-inch upper from this Daniel Defense gun.
A device is attached to 12 weapons, allowing semi-automatic rifles to mimic fully automatic.
New law regarding pistol braces. It's actually a ruling because the ATF does not have the authority.
And that's what's a shame is, you got idiots out there that screw up stuff for everybody else out there.
It's illegal to own unless you have a permit or a tax stamp.
In the end, they came to the conclusion that they would utilize a standard analogous to the rule of Lindy rather than the Chevron deference system. Because of this, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals came to the conclusion that the rule of Lindy should be used as a guide for the interpretation, which favored the pro-Second Amendment side. Divergent approaches to Supreme Court review. Both sides are now seeking Supreme Court review, but they are approaching it differently. The ATF is pushing back against explicitly adding the rule of Lindy into the question for this case.
The tan part of the semi-automatic rifle is called a bump stock. It's a completely legal accessory that increases the firing rates.
You can apply for the tax stamp and not pay the $200 fee. It's a one-time fee.
Keep in mind that all of these add-ons to these weapons have all been approved by the federal government.
ATF agreed to, in 2012, should not be under the jurisdiction of your rules?
Regular semi-auto is like, then we're going to go to semi-auto with the bump stock.
They argue that the question initially presented to the Supreme Court in their petition would cover the issue without the need for an explicit statement. It's noteworthy that both sides are seeking review, albeit in distinct ways. The ATF is already contesting the idea of explicitly addressing the rule of Lindy, indicating their strategy for the upcoming legal battle. Implications of conflicting circuit court opinions. The existence of conflicting opinions in various circuit courts on this issue is of particular interest to the Supreme Court. Such conflicts often motivate the Supreme Court to intervene and provide clarity on important legal matters. The Fifth Circuit's en banc panel's decision striking down the bump stock ban would become precedent in the Fifth Circuit if the Supreme Court doesn't grant review. This would mean that the ATF could not enforce the ban in that jurisdiction.
To actually make laws without congressional approval. They're really there to enforce laws.
They're going to get these. They're going to be a regulation, and it ain't going to change a damn thing. It's not going to stop.
And you can apply for that. That's one way to go ahead and make this legal. You can apply for the tax stamp right now.
Take the evil
You won't get the
bonfire
evil
stocks.
people out of the world.
But you still ain't going to stop nothing with the regulations.
10-inch AR-15 pistol with pistol brace is now considered an SBR.
Considering the variety of opinions and decisions across different circuits, the Supreme Court may find it challenging to avoid taking up this case. The potential for dramatic differences in federal law and ATF enforcement underscores the significance of this issue, making it likely that the Supreme Court will need to address it. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.